Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhay. The memory of victims of the mass shootings in Babi Yar was honored by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Between September 29th and 30th, 1941, the Nazi invaders shot almost 34,000 people there, mostly Jews. During the Nazi occupation, more than 100,000 people of different nationalities were killed in Babi Yar.
Two words with more than 100,000 lives behind them. Two words describing millions of crippled fates. Two words followed by 80 years of common pain of the Jewish and Ukrainian people. Babi Yar. Such tragedies should not be repeated, neither in Ukraine nor anywhere else in the world. Never again.
Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs called on international partners to honor the memory of victims of mass shootings in Babi Yar. They noted in the ministry that September 29th is a mournful and deeply symbolic date in the history of Ukraine. The death line in Kyiv did not stop until the capital of Ukraine was liberated from the invaders.
To honor the memory of the many millions of Holocaust victims, we call on international partners to join the commemorative events taking place at Babi Yar and in the efforts being made to restore and establish historical truth and justice. We believe that it is only through international solidarity, by promoting and protecting universal values, and by making a stand against all forms of discrimination, that we can safeguard against such terrible human tragedies ever being allowed to take place again.
80 years ago, Ukraine faced one of the greatest tragedies in its history. Nazi invaders launched the European most populous execution in a Babi Yar ravine in Kyiv. Over the occupation years, over 100,000 people were shot there. The case behind the Babi Yar name has become the synonym for brutality and grief. My colleagues will tell you more.
Yet on the second day of the Nazi occupation of Kyiv, September 20th, 1941, prisoners of war were the first to be shot in Babi Yar. But the first mass execution was carried out here in a week. 752 patients of a nearby psychiatric hospital were killed there. However, the calamity culminated in the 29th and 30th of September. For 2 days, Nazis shot more than 33,000 Jews here. The survivors' descendants gather annually on Ilyenko Street.
To commemorate the killed, they stepped down the path which 80 years ago led Kyiv Jews to the shooting place.
Dina Pronicheva, who survived the tragedy by miracle, later recalled the following. We entered a long passage between two columns of soldiers. They all had rubber batons or sticks. The blows fell on the passing people. I saw people falling. Some of them remained on the ground, and the crowd walked right over the bodies, trampling them. Everything that was happening made my head drop in the gloom. It seemed that they had injured me, but I already couldn't comprehend anything.
And then she added, only one thing hammered in my head, don't fall.
During the first 2 October weeks, 15,000 Jews perished. Several survivors were aided by mined locals. Decades later, these people will be called righteous among nations. Today, those who risked their lives are almost all gone.
My great-grandmother and my grandmother saved 3 different groups of people during the war after Babi Yar started. One of the episodes is when they, together with the rescued woman, came to the police station to testify she is taken from an orphanage and is not of Jewish origin.
The main reason why the Jews of Kyiv did not flee from the Nazis is that they did not realize their real ideology. Until 1941, the Soviet propaganda portrayed Adolf Hitler as a friend of the USSR, making no mention about his crimes. And the day before the start of the executions of Jews, the following posters appeared all over the Kyiv saying,
All the Jews of the city of Kyiv and its vicinities must appear on Monday, September 29, 1941 at 8 a.m. at the corner of Melnikovskaya and Dokhturovskaya near the cemetery. Take your documents, money, valuables, as well as warm clothes, underwear, etc. with you. Who among the Jews does not comply with this order and is found elsewhere will be shot.
People had no choice.
The Jews believed Stalin, believed Soviet propaganda, believed the radio and the press that Kyiv would never be surrendered. When the shooting began, the plane hovered over the Babi Yar so that the shooting could not be heard.
In 2 weeks, almost the entire Jewish population of Kyiv was exterminated at Babi Yar.
The shootings continued here until the end of 1943. This ravine became a mass grave for Roma, members of underground and resistance, as well as prisoners of the Syrets concentration camp established nearby. In total, over 100,000 people were shot here during the years of occupation. Until now, no one can give the exact figure.
And the attempt of the Soviet leadership to remove the memory of a common human tragedy is even more cynical.
Hitler's regime killed the Jews of Kyiv, and Stalin's regime erased the memory of the Kyiv Jews. The reason for this obscurity of the Babi Yar, in my opinion, lies in 2 dimensions. The first is the regime's anti-Semitism. The second is the disappointment after Israel was established in 1948, and it refused to follow the cooperation line with Stalin's dictatorship.
To hide the truth, Babi Yar was turned into a waste pit for the nearby brick factories. In a couple of years, the ravine got filled up with waste to the brim. In 1961, the dam which held back the residues broke. The waste flow claimed, according to various sources, up to 1,500 lives. Some residents told that this was the dad who took revenge.
Сегодня история Бабьего Яра кажется нереальной. Такое просто невозможно вообразить.
Today, the story of Babi Yar seems fantastic. This is simply impossible to imagine, but they are all here, still. All 100,000 lives, tiny and tall, rich and poor, just people. The memory is short, but the city still remembers everything. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Nick Starkov and Danilo Kobza, UATV News.
Ukraine has already fulfilled 46% of the obligations within the association agreement with the European Union in the agriculture sector. This was stated by Olena Stefanushina, Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. She stressed that the development of bilateral trade in agricultural products between Ukraine and the European Union requires a revision of the residual tariff quotas. Now, Ukraine is preparing to present its assessment of achieving the goals of the association agreement at the EU summit. Our analysis shows that thanks to the association agreement, Ukraine and the EU have significantly increased bilateral cooperation, and we have managed to implement a significant amount of European legislation. The Ukrainian government is also preparing proposals for further integration of Ukraine into the EU. Barrierfree handbook was presented in electronic format by First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, on the International Day of Universal Access to Information. The book contains the norms of a barrier-free language, a dictionary, and talks about the components of barrierlessness. Human rights activists, psychologists, parents raising children with disabilities, Ukrainian and international experts have worked on it. In addition, in March of 2022, a printed version of the Barrier-Free Handbook with elements of the Braille font should be released as well.
Ми постійно до цього прагнемо, щоб безбар'єрність.
We are constantly striving for barrierlessness to become a new social norm. We understand that society means, first of all, communication. Society is about connections between people. Therefore, it is important that this communication, this connection between people becomes barrier-free as well. This guide will help everyone who wants to communicate correctly with tolerance, write about people, address people, and tell about people in a correct, tolerant, barrier-free language. Next year, Ukrainians over 70 with full work experience will receive no less than $100 of monthly state pensions. This was reported by Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine, Marina Lazebna. According to her, the only way to increase payments to pensioners is to launch the second level of pension provision, compulsory personal savings. How are the working Ukrainians saving money for future? My colleagues found out.
Taras started saving money for retirement many years ago, when he was 30. He says even then he understood that for a decent future it is necessary to save money while being young.
I know about pensions people receive, and I've got doubts. What will happen when I reach pension age? How much will I receive, and what can I buy for this money?
In order to keep money safe, Taras uses the services of a non-state pension fund. He transfers about 2% of his monthly income there. Besides, he uses other financial instruments, for example, bank deposits. But it is a reliable fund that is better for long-term investment.
The term of the deposit is a year or 2 or 3, and after that it can be withdrawn. But contributions to a non-state pension fund can be collected in certain individual circumstances. In emergencies, for example. In general, they will be there, they will work, accumulate.
But most Ukrainians rely on the state system for retirement benefits. According to it, pensioners are paid by working people, counting on the same payments when they got old. According to the State Statistics Service, there are now about 12 million pensioners in Ukraine and the same number of people who pay social contributions. This means that every working Ukrainian pays for one pensioner. Over the past 30 years, this ratio has worsened almost twofold, and further the situation will become even more difficult.
Now, the citizens of Ukraine who were born in the late 50s and early 60s are reaching retirement age. On the other hand, citizens of Ukraine who were born in the late 90s and early 2000s are entering the working age. These are the crisis years. There are 2 times less of them than those that finished their activities.
The only way to provide Ukrainians with decent pensions, which will not depend on the demographic situation, is to introduce a mandatory level of a funded pension system, says Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine.
This is a person's property. They use it, dispose of it. If something happens to a person, this money is inherited by relatives. Here is the culture. The person takes care of their retirement future, and this is their money. This is very true.
Compulsory personal pension savings will exist together with a solidarity system. The Parliament of Ukraine has registered several bills that establish the rules for the operation of this level of pension provision. Discussions are ongoing about the amount and source of contributions. One of the options is that 1% of the salary is transferred to the personal account by the employer and one by the employee himself.
We made calculations for the full length of service. The joint and several pension will be twice as much due to these pension savings.
The Minister of Social Policy expects that one of the proposed bills will be passed by the Parliament of Ukraine in the first reading this fall. It will take about 1.5 years to fully launch the funded pension system. Reported by Nick Starkov and Yulia Krychkova for UATV News.
Most of the patients with COVID-19 who are currently treated in hospitals are unvaccinated. This was stated by Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal. First of all, people over 60 are in the risk zone. The number of coronavirus infections continues growing in the country. Over the past day, more than 9,600 new cases were recorded. The Prime Minister called on Ukrainians to get vaccinated. According to him, this is the only way to overcome the pandemic.
I urge you get vaccinated because this is the only effective way to protect oneself from the infection and, most importantly, from possible hospitalization or a severe course of the disease. More than 90% of people who go to hospitals now are not vaccinated. Almost 100% of deaths are also among the unvaccinated.
Ukraine will expand the program of cooperation with the International Monetary Fund. This was announced by Deputy Head of the National Bank. It goes about the standby program, which ends on December 8th. The extension of the program is needed to receive all tranches from the IMF. The first, in the amount of more than $2 billion, was transferred to Ukraine last year. Work on the second, amounting to some $700 million, continues. The IMF mission started its work in Ukraine last week. Among other things, the issue of extending the standby program is being discussed as well.
We consider it to be reasonable to study the possibility of extending the program for some 6 to 9 months. We are not talking about the unification of the trenches yet. If the program is extended, the trenches will be implemented in the new perimeter. It is very important for us to prolong and maintain effective cooperation with the IMF.
More than 25,000 Danube salmon fry were released into the Prut, Cheremush and Tisa rivers. This was done for the first time in the Transcarpathian region at the state budget expense. Danube salmon is listed into the Red Book of Ukraine. This is one of the largest fish in mountain rivers, the length of which reaches more than 180 centimeters, and its weight makes up to 60 kilograms. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages.